Okay, let's begin. Let me know if you can hear me clearly, okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so today we're studying biology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so today we were supposed to, I think, start diffusion and osmosis. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so do you know what diffusion is?
Yeah, it's the movement of molecules from a higher concentration gradient to a lower concentration gradient.
Exactly. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from a higher concentration to a lower concentration down a concentration gradient. So yeah, let's write them down because I want you to take notes. Okay, now what is a concentration gradient?
Oh, I don't really know.
Okay, so the concentration gradient is basically the difference in concentration between the two regions that we're talking about. Okay, so um, yeah, so the concentration gradient, if they ever ask you to write a definition of the concentration gradient, you can write that the concentration gradient is the difference in concentration between a region of higher concentration of a substance and a region of lower concentration, okay, of the substance. Now, obviously, because there is a difference between the concentrations in two different regions, that's why the diffusion is occurring in the first place, right? So that's why we mentioned that it's down a concentration gradient. So we are going from high to low concentration. Yeah, so I think you already know that if the concentration gradient is higher, that is steeper, the rate of diffusion will be faster. Okay,
Yeah.
so steeper, let's say like that. And let's draw another one, probably like that. Then for the blue one, the rate of diffusion will be higher. Okay. Okay. Now, so like obviously diffusion হয় যখন concentration gradient exist করে, but will it happen forever? There needs to be an ending point, right? So when does diffusion end? Like what is the ending point?
When like it's spread evenly, like when the particles are spread evenly.
Exactly. Yeah, so diffusion will take place until an equilibrium is reached, right? So until, let's say, the particles are evenly distributed throughout the region. Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's it about diffusion. And then right now we are going to talk about, diffusion in cells, like how and where actually diffusion occurs and how does it contribute um, to different functions in a cell. So can you give an example of diffusion in cells? Like where does it occur and like what is happening in a cell that is diffusion?
Apple, the carbon dioxide and oxygen, like taking in of those things.
Exactly. That is a very good example, and that is probably the only, not the only example, like probably the main example in human cells, for example. Okay, so let's write an example. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you sort of GIF of a typical diffusion. Okay, I'm going to show you in the next page because then it's going to cover all my notes. Yeah, so let's write down about the example. Yeah, so first thing is we already know from the previous chapter that the cell surface membrane is partially permeable, right? So it allows certain things and it blocks certain things. But it is very much permeable to gases, so especially oxygen and carbon dioxide, so they can easily pass through this membrane. Okay, so that is number one point. Now next thing is like the cells that are respiring. Inside the cell we have a very high concentration of carbon dioxide, right? And we need to release that. So obviously carbon dioxide is going to diffuse out of the cell because yeah, the inside the cell it has a higher concentration and outside there's a lower concentration, so diffusion will occur. And in the same way oxygen in the blood, let's say, is in a higher concentration than the cell, so that's why oxygen will diffuse from the blood into the cell, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what we're going to write. um, so I'm just going to draw it in a diagram instead of write it in a sentence. So let's say this is our cell. So there are a lot of carbon dioxide and it will diffuse out. In the same way, let's say this is like the blood. So there are a lot of oxygen. So they will diffuse into the cell. Yeah, so that is a very that is one of the main examples. That is basically how our blood, the red blood cells, transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's just simple diffusion. Yeah. So I think that's clear. Are there any questions?
No, Apu.
Okay, great. Now another point to make is that in unicellular organisms, unicellular means, they just exist as a cell. Organisms such as, you know, such as bacteria or amoeba. I think you know what an amoeba is. It's a protozoa, okay, etc. Diffusion is very important in those organisms as well, because they even take up, nutrients and minerals from their surroundings through diffusion, okay, is used for nutrient uptake from the surroundings. Okay, let me know if you're done noting them down. Hello?
Yeah, Apu, just 1 second. I'm almost done.
Yeah, sure.
Apu, I'm done.
Okay, great. Now I think let's start with osmosis. That's all I have to say about diffusion. So yeah. Okay, so osmosis. Osmosis is almost similar to diffusion, but in osmosis, we're only talking about water. Okay, so it is the net movement of water molecules that we're going to talk about. Okay, if you ever come across a question that asks you to write down the definition of osmosis, you have to say that it is the net movement of water molecules from a region of higher water, lower water potential. I just forgot region. Now, it is very important to mention that it is through a partially permeable membrane. Without the existence of a partially permeable membrane, I mean, there is no osmosis. You'll know why just in a moment. Okay, so I was asking, what is the water potential?
Yeah, Apo, is it like how much water goes in and goes out, maybe?
Yeah, you're sort of correct. Water potential is basically a measure of the tendency of the movement of water. So, like, does it have any tendency to flow, or does it have, like, is it stationary, or what state is it in? So if they ever ask you, like, what is water potential, or define water potential, you have to write that water potential is a measure of the tendency of water molecules to move from one region to another. Notice how in diffusion we actually talked about concentration, like region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, here you're actually talking about a region of higher water concentration to a region of lower water concentration. But we don't actually say that, because it's weird to actually say water concentration, because think of a let's think of a solution. Okay, so let's say you have this beaker and it has this solution. Okay, obviously a solution has a lot of solutes. Without solutes there is no solution. So let's say these are solutes, these blue dots that I'm drawing. And obviously, typically we use water as solvent, right? So let's say these green ones are all water. Now, water is everywhere, but these green molecules, these green color that I'm drawing, these are water molecules that are bound to these solutes. Because how does a solute dissolve in water? Water molecules need to bind to it and then dissolve it. Obviously, কোনো কিছু dissolve করতে হলে, কোনো কিছু যদি পানিতে dissolve করে, it means that that thing just made hydrogen bonds with water. So water is like bound to it, and that's how it got dissolved. So there are certain water molecules which are actually bound to this solute with hydrogen bonds. The rest are, let's say, free. অনেকগুলো আছে free. So these bound water molecules, these are, they cannot move, right? Because they're bound. Only these free ones can move. So these are free, these are bound. Let's say H2O. And these are free H2O. Okay. I'm just gonna write it down. The blue ones are solutes. Okay. So now let's think of a concentrated solution and a dilute solution. যদি একটা কনসেন্ট্রেটেড সলিউশন থাকে, যদি একটা কনসেন্ট্রেটেড সলিউশন থাকে, কনসেন্ট্রেটেড সলিউশন obviously we know just solutes এর নাম্বার খুবই বেশি, so it's like very thick and concentrated solution. So that means that, you know, most of the water is actually bound to the solutes, right? So like most of them, they're like bound. I mean, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still gonna drop them. Yeah. So that means this when we have a concentrated solution, we actually have a low water potential, because these waters, they don't have, you know, the tendency to move. Okay. So that's why they have a low water potential. And what happens when we have a dilute solution? That means the number of solutes is less. So dhoro ei ekta duita tinta charta, and then only a few water molecules are bound, the rest are free. Okay, so that means there are a lot of, you know, water molecules which actually can move. So this has a high water potential. That's how we talk about water. We never say, okay, concentration of water is this. Yeah, you can say it could be that, you know, the volume of water in both these beakers are the same. And what is concentration? Concentration equation key. Concentration of anything is number of particles divided by unit volume. Let's say a concentrated solution যে পিকচারটা আমি তোমাকে দিছি and dilute solution এর যে পিকচারটা দিছি, দুইটাতেই number of water হচ্ছে, number of water particles same, number of unit volume of same. So concentration of water বের করতে গেলে তো সেমই আসবে, but water potential কিন্তু different. Like I said, it depends on the solute. Okay, I hope you get the point. আমি অনেক ডিটেইলে চলে গেছি.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's why we talk about water potential and not water concentration. Yeah, that's why high water potential থেকে low water potential water move করে. Okay, so let's say এখান থেকে এখানে diffusion টাও. So that is from a dilute solution towards the concentrated solution. Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay, great. Yeah, another point to make is that pure water has the highest water potential, because it's clear now why. Because in pure water we don't have any solutes, any impurities, or anything that the water is bound to, so it has the highest water potential. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example, actually a question, and I want you to take some time and answer that, and afterwards I'm going to give the answer myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring out. Yeah, please try this one.
Osmosis occurred here, right? Apo, osmosis occurred here, right?
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Osmosis took place here, right? And
Yeah, exactly.
so the concentration it had spread evenly. Thus, the water from one side it went up, and to the other side it's decreased.
Yeah, exactly. So এখানে osmosis হচ্ছে এর জন্য water left side থেকে right side এ move করতেছে, and that's why the level went up, as you can see on the right side. And yeah, so now the concentration of the sucrose solution should be equal. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, then I can write it. So if I want to write it sequentially, we are. Oh. Okay, so number one thing is percent sucrose solution is more concentrated than 10%, right? So it has a lower water potential than 10%. The second point is the membrane is partially permeable, right? Since the membrane is partially permeable, only water molecules can pass through. Because sucrose molecules are way too big, you know. So as a result, don't want to write as a result. Water molecules will move from the 10% solution to the 20, that is down the water potential gradient. Okay, until what? Until the water potentials of both the solutions are the same. Okay, so the net movement of water molecules is from left to right. Okay, so that's why the right arm has a higher water level at the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to write that, I guess. All right, so that's enough. I have you written them?
I'm writing the last part.
Okay, sure. Take your time.
I'm done.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about osmosis in plant cells, and then we're going to talk about osmosis in animal cells. Okay. Um. Yeah. All right. So obviously, osmosis, plays a really big role in plants because that's how they suck up water from the soil. And yeah, the thing is, now I think I'm going to teach you about how it affects the cell, how the water potentials can actually affect different cells. Uh, about osmosis in water transport, you're going to learn about that in plant nutrition. For now, let's just look at how osmosis affects a plant cell. Okay. Okay. Um, One thing to point out is that the cell wall is actually fully permeable. Okay. Um, yeah, that is the first point I want to make. And like we just discussed, osmosis cannot happen without a partially permeable membrane. So osmosis never occurs through the cell wall, okay? It occurs through the cell surface membrane. Um, yeah. And we also saw that in plant cells, there is a, central large vacuole that that is filled with cell sap. So since it takes up, most of the space of a plant cell, we can say, the water potential of the cell sap is basically the water potential of the plant cell. Okay. So yeah, that is the second point to make. The we can basically assume that because yeah, the vacuole is basically it's taking most of the space of a plant cell. So বাকি যে যতটুকু জায়গা আছে অতটুকুর ওয়াটার পটেনশিয়াল বলতে গেলে নেগলিজিবল। সো সেল স্যাপের ওয়াটার পটেনশিয়ালটাই যদি দেওয়া থাকে কোনো কোয়েশ্চেনে, you can take it as the water potential of the entire plant cell. Okay. All right, so let's say when a plant cell is immersed in a solution of higher water potential relative to its cell sap, then what will happen? Water molecules will enter the cell by osmosis. Okay, so let's say we have we immerse when a plant cell is immersed in a solution of higher water potential relative to its cell sap. Higher water potential মানে হচ্ছে একটা dilute solution. Okay. And water molecules will enter the cell by osmosis. Okay. And then when water keeps entering a cell, what happens? Obviously, everything starts to increase and expand, right? And
Yes.
all the cell contents will exert pressure on the cell wall. Okay. So let me write down the consequences in red.